Morning, everybody. My name is Marie Beau. I'm the Executive Director of the EU Chamber of Commerce here in Canada. We are very happy to welcome you to this webinar, which is the first one of a series we will dedicate to access to markets. The focus today will be on government procurement, and we organize this webinar in cooperation with Procurement Assistance Canada. Regarding maybe a few words on the webinar, we'll have first the opening made by our EUCCAN's President, Adrian Thomas. Then we'll have a presentation made by Procurement Assistance Canada, and then we'll have a Q&A session. For the Q&A session and Q&A period, I would ask to all the attendees to put that question in the Q&A box we've got on the bottom of the screen there. And I will and we have the pleasure then to lead the moderation and to ask the questions to the people and the person of Procurement Assistance Canada. Thank you again to all of you, and I give now the floor to Adrian.
Well, thank you, Marie, and welcome once again to our audience. This is our Access to Market webinar series that will hopefully support EU and Canadian businesses with important, useful hands-on information on how to do business in Canada and with the European Union under CETA, which is the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement. The topic for this webinar is, as Marie mentioned, doing business with the Canadian government. So this is very much related to federal procurements. Why is this important? The federal government, or the Government of Canada, procures large amounts of goods and services. What we can see is that the expenditure in the Canadian government is somewhere between 12 to 15% of GDP, which fluctuates from year to year, but that's a significant amount of business. For those of you attending, I think from Europe, what's interesting for you is that government procurements are covered by the CETA trade agreement, specifically Chapter 19, which gives reciprocal access to government procurement for goods and for services, and to make sure that those processes are open and transparent. So I think, however, we still need to understand how to do business with the federal contracts, and so this is some of what we're working here, and I think this is also important for our small and medium enterprises. So there are some new tools such as the Canada Buys platform, and some of this will be presented by our guests today from the Procurement Assistance Canada. So this should be a very informative webinar for all of you, and without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest speaker. Just basically introduce Procurement Assistance Canada, which is a public services and procurement Canada, which has been working to reduce the barriers to simplify requirements for businesses that want to do business with the government. Our guest speaker today is going to be Manny, who is the Chief of the SME Stakeholder Engagement at Procurement Assistance Canada, Public Services and Procurement Canada. Manny has been working for Public Services and Procurement Canada in the Ontario region since 1991, and would say knows pretty much everything you could possibly know about Government of Canada procurement. So with that, I will pass it over to Manny. And Manny, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Well, thank you very much for that warm introduction, Adrian, and Thomas and Marie. Thank you very much for hosting us here today, and welcome everybody to this session. My name is Menelaus, Manny for short, Argyropoulos, and I am the Chief of SME Stakeholder Engagement with Procurement Assistance Canada. I do have with me today as well some colleagues of mine that will be helping out throughout the day, posting some links in the chat, and also fielding some questions regarding procurement. So Vincent Vilaka, our policy advisor, or our policy analyst, as well as Ronnie K. Heel, who is our procurement specialist, is with me today. So when we first approached EUCCAN, or they approached us about this session, we started to think about opportunities that we can provide awareness to businesses on how to navigate the federal procurement system. And essentially, that's what we're here to do today, is to help guide you. And that's what the role of Procurement Assistance Canada is. I'm going to go into it very shortly as to what our mandate is. But I want to be clear before we start that we are not actual procurement people. We're not the ones that are running the procurements for the Government of Canada. We're experts in understanding the process, how to navigate that process, how to get involved, and to provide that assistance to businesses, any businesses for that matter, but specifically small and medium enterprises as they go through that journey through federal procurement. And we're also not the department or experts on the CETA agreement. Our colleagues at Global Affairs Canada are the ones that develop and implement and control of the trade agreement language that goes into it. Simply put, Procurement Assistance Canada through Public Services and Procurement Canada integrates the terms into our federal procurements to allow that reciprocal trade to happen in both regions. So without further ado, I'm just going to launch into my presentation here today, which will take about 30 to 35 minutes. I encourage you to pose your questions in the Q&A, as Marie said. This is going to be a high-level general overview of the fundamentals of doing business with the Government of Canada and what the role of Procurement Assistance Canada, our office, is all about. And then we could take some questions from you that might need some answering. If we can't answer them here today, we'll take them back, of course, and seek to find some answers for you. So from the perspective of Procurement Assistance Canada, we were created in 2005 nationally out of a need to make federal procurement more open, fair, transparent, and accessible to all businesses. But in particular, through massive consultations the previous years with small and medium enterprises, and by definition, we use the former Industry Canada, now Innovation Science Economic Development Canada's definition for small and medium enterprises, and that relates to the business size and how many employees they have. Doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the value, the revenue they earn, or any other aspects. It's just employees. So if you're a business that's less than 99 employees, you're considered small. If you're less than 499, you're considered medium. If you're 500 and above, you're considered large. But again, our office doesn't discriminate against anyone. Essentially, we help any business that wants to learn how to do business with the Government of Canada. So we do that through engagement, assistance, and providing information through awareness sessions like these here today to you members or affiliates of the EUCCAN organization. But we're all across our region, here in Ontario region. We're regionally based, but all across Canada as well, trying to help support and provide awareness to SMEs in particular to get involved, because a lot of them don't even know that there is a marketplace here for them. It is quite a large marketplace, as sorry, I forgot the name. Adrian mentioned earlier, but there's a large contingency where there's a lot of market for SMEs in particular, and they're not even aware of it. So that's what we're here to do and talk to you about. We have a second mandate as well, which is to reduce barriers for small and medium enterprises. And we're the voice for them. We're kind of advocate on their behalf. If they have issues or challenges that are not working out and they're consistently being closed to these opportunities, then they have to come to our office. Otherwise, if they don't, we think the system's working fine. And of course, through feedback, this is where we identify these barriers. We have a barrier analysis reduction unit in Ottawa that looks to reduce these barriers and work with federal procurement officials to change policies, make impacts, and improve the system for access to all Canadians and all businesses throughout the world. Now, we're also looking for opportunities to advance supplier diversity. And over the last half decade or even longer, Canada has made a push to make the federal procurement system more accessible to diverse, underrepresented businesses. And by this, we mean specific groups that are challenged in entering into our market space. These include underrepresented groups like Indigenous businesses, for example, women businesses, Black or racialized businesses, LGBTQ2S+ businesses, persons with disability, Francophone minority official language groups, even social enterprises, businesses that are in the green and clean tech space, and youth. So those are the key areas that we're focused on, but all in all, we help every business out to help them navigate through the system. And it is a process, right? And a lot of businesses, when they come to consider federal procurement, really don't have the public sector perspective. They're used to like private sector business opportunities where you meet and greet and you get a contract. Here, in order to have a system that's fair and open and transparent and accessible and equal for everybody, we need to compete it. And there's a lot of competition in federal procurement and in all levels of government as well. And you'll hear in a few minutes, we're restricted by laws and regulations that govern how this is done. And this is why sometimes it gets to be a little bit complex on the public sector side. So this is where our office comes in and guides you. So normally we do these sessions, they last about 2 hours long. They're very involved, walk you through a lot of explanation, but essentially the objectives even here for today are clear. It's trying to help you understand what this procurement process is all about. Who are the players? What departments buy? How we buy? Why we buy? What we buy? So it's all about understanding the demand from the federal side, as well as how you as a supplier can then get involved if you know that it's a marketplace for you. And you can use various tools that are available to you that we've created and we've put into play to allow you to determine if it's a marketplace for you. Then if you do determine it's a marketplace, then how do you get started? How do you register? How do you look to connect and build networks or find individuals or end users that are making the request for federal procurement to market yourself to them? Obviously, that plays a pivotal part in how you move forward as well. And then finally, if you're looking to compete, where are you going to find these opportunities? You know, where's the source? Where's the government electronic tendering service? We're going to go over some of that. And then our PAC services for support in your federal procurement journey. Again, I encourage you, if you have questions, to please post them in the Q&A. Now, opportunities for smaller and diverse businesses do exist within the Government of Canada's federal procurement system. A lot of businesses are not aware of this. Canada, as Adrian mentioned, is one of the largest buyers in all of Canada. We buy in the neighborhood of actually about $20 to $25 billion annually. We buy a wide range of goods, services, and construction, well over 15,000 different types of products that we buy. And these in turn are spends in the billions and billions of dollars in many instances. But there's also low dollar or smaller value purchases, common everyday things that the government buys to keep its operations going. And these are contracts that could be valued less than $1 million or even less than $100,000. So here's just some quick stats from 2017 to 2020 that indicate 75% of the contracts valued are less than $1 million that we issue contracts on. So understanding who the players are is important. So as the Government of Canada, the main procurement arm of the federal government is Public Services and Procurement Canada. We're a common service provider to all of government. By that, what we mean is we do some of the work that is needed by these departments so that they can focus on doing their job in serving Canadians and international groups as well. For the most part, we provide common services like pay and pension. We are the translators for the Government of Canada. We are also the real estate portfolio management group for the Government of Canada. So all government assets, management of the facilities, and office lease space is handled by the Public Services and Procurement Canada. But equally as important is the role we play in federal procurement, as we are the main purchasers of goods, services, and construction for the government. Our minister has the highest delegated authority to purchase for the Government of Canada. Other departments, there's about 100 or 110 of them. They also can purchase goods, services, and construction for their offices. And in a couple of minutes, I'm going to tell you what their delegated authorities are. But if they exceed those authorities, they then have to come to Public Service Procurement Canada. So again, I reiterate, it's important to understand that everything that we do must be conducted in an open, fair, and transparent manner, and allows all suppliers equal opportunity to bid for contracts. The most important piece that you should leave here today is that third bullet. We are governed by federal laws, regulations, Treasury Board guidelines, and Government of Canada procurement policies in the way that we do procurement, but equally so, we're governed by trade agreements that Canada has implemented and put into place to allow reciprocal trade to happen between our nation and other nations around the world. And we'll get to some of that in a couple of minutes as well. But that's how government contracting happens. PSPC is the main buyer, other departments buy. And in retrospect, while Public Service Procurement Canada is the main buyer, we only do about 15 to 17,000 contracts annually. And these are the bigger contracts, of course, as a higher delegated authority in the millions and billions of dollars on behalf of other departments. Those other 100 or 110 other departments buy in the neighborhood of about, or do about 300 to 400,000 contracts annually. So a lot of opportunity to align yourself with the right departments, with their requirements, to see how you can become a supplier to them. Now, we did talk about trade agreements impacting how we do procurement and how we can put terms and conditions into procurements. We're governed by those. So I'm just showing you a couple of examples. CETA, the most applicable one here for companies that may be outside of Canada. You would need to consider the trade agreement implications. So in excess of 238,400 for services and for goods, those international companies could look to compete for those opportunities that are posted on our government electronic tendering service. And if it's construction, it would be in excess of $9.1 million. In retrospect, other trade agreements, and we have many, many, many more, the Canadian Free Trade Agreement impact is anything above 30,300 for Canadian companies that are part of the Canadian Free Trade Agreement through their provinces. We must post openly for competition if it exceeds 30,300. So if we had an $85,000 contract, European or international companies that are outside of the jurisdiction here would not be able to compete for that because it doesn't exceed the goods threshold. It would need to be over 238 for those companies to bid on it on the open tender service. And likewise for services and construction. I just want to set that context up because there's one way to do business with Canada if you're a subsidiary or you have a company here in Canada. And if you're simply from abroad, then you have to take those considerations into effect as they're impacted by the trade agreements. And whatever the trade agreement thresholds are, that's how you can determine if you can compete for those opportunities or not. Moving forward, these are the delegated authorities of some of the other groups or departments within the Government of Canada. They have the authority to buy up to 25,000 for goods, up to 2 million for services, and 400,000 for construction in most instances. Some may have a little more, but most likely it'll be around these thresholds. If they exceed these amounts, then they have to come to Public Services and Procurement Canada, and we as the common service provider for procurement will act on their behalf and their interest to determine the best course of action to then procure those goods, services, or construction they want. Now, we may use already established methods of supply or work with them to create a new one, like a request for proposal or some other qualification that they may require. But that's how the process works. So at this point, that's the contextual overview of who or how we do business and who buys, why we buy, and where the marketplace is. Obviously, it's driven by demand, and we buy in a lot of areas that our operations needed. So if you want to really find out what departments are looking to buy or maybe where they're going or where they have budget, I encourage you to look at all of the Government of Canada's departments with their plans and priorities, and as they issue them on an annual basis that indicate, you know, we have X amount of budget this year, we're looking to do this, that, and the other thing over the next few years. And on the procurement side, we may be taking these steps. So look at the plans and priorities to get direction as to whether or not there's potential marketplace for you. Now, how do you begin your journey? If you're really looking to get involved with the Government of Canada and procurement, we suggest you start as registering in a supplier database that we have, and there's 2 of them currently. Previously, our government electronic tendering service was known as buyandSell.gc.ca, and there's a registration system in there called the Supplier Registration Information Database, SRI, where you go in, you register if you have a Canada Revenue Agency business number, so you're in Canada, you have that CRA number, you put that information in plus your general business information, and from there you submit it. We check against CRA's database, and in a matter of minutes you get back a procurement business number mimicking your 9-digit number, not to make it complicated. And instead of RT001 for your company, you would get a PG001. So then you're in the system and then creating your profile as to what types of commodities, goods, services, or construction based on a unique classification coding system the government used to use called Goods and Services Identification numbers. Recently, because of our obligations to certain trade agreements, including CETA, but also for purposes of modernizing federal procurement, we have moved to an electronic procurement solution called canadabuys.canada.ca. It's based on SAP Ariba platform, and it's open for business now. So we're transitioning from buy and sell over to Canada Buys, and we're requesting that businesses look to register free of charge to get an account on SAP Ariba for Canadian contracts. If you already have an account, you don't have to recreate your account. You just need to select Canada Buys, so the Government of Canada's purchases, by filling out a form to indicate to us your interest in doing business with the Government of Canada. And then once you have that compliance form filled out, then you can proceed with accessing and downloading our documents through your account that you may have. If you're a new account, you need a new account, then we could walk you through it, or our colleagues over at EPS, Electronic Procurement Solution, with Canada Buys can help you on that as well. Over the next little while, you're going to be seeing some info sessions and awareness sessions that we are going to be providing as well through Procurement Assistance Canada to help guide you in the fundamentals of registration. So keep an eye on that, but I did want to let you know that we are transitioning to this new electronic procurement solution level for procurements moving forward. Now, this is the explanation of the SRI. You'll get a copy of this deck and you can use it as a guide for sure. Afterwards, there's some useful links in here, but as I mentioned, it's the SRI, which is managed and maintained by Public Services Procurement Canada, our department mostly. Other departments can use it as well for low dollar opportunities to seek out suppliers that have indicated I can provide this GSIN or commodity code or that GSIN or commodity code, and then source out 3 of you to get pricing, for example, for low dollar. If you're not in there, they may not be able to source you. If they can't find somebody in their area, they may use other sources to source out suppliers, maybe a Google search, maybe other databases, et cetera, et cetera. One thing I neglected to say as well here is that with Canada Buys, registration is also free. It's not something that you need to pay for. You may need to go back afterwards to put in some account details if you're going to be submitting and if you're close to a contract award. So the other thing to note for Canada Buys is that we are migrating in order to fulfill some of these trade agreement obligations to the United Nations Standards Products and Services Codes, as opposed to our previous goods and services identification number coding for all of our goods and services that we buy. So UNSPSC codes versus GSIN codes. I know there's a lot of other jurisdictions using different categories of coding for their purchases, like NAICS codes, North American Classification Coding, but Canada has adopted the UNSPSC structure. So moving forward, we have this slide in here just more for awareness, because a lot of businesses don't realize that the Government of Canada currently only has one real set-aside program, and that is with our Indigenous people here in Canada. Wherever Canada needs to do a federal procurement that's in a jurisdiction where there's 51% of the population of Indigenous peoples, we need to first and foremost look to award that contract as a competitive contract through an Indigenous business. And if you're not an Indigenous business, you won't be able to gain access to this. And in order to help support on the capacity side, maybe there are some Indigenous businesses that want to take on the work but don't have that full capacity. Non-Indigenous businesses can look to partner with them to present a joint ventureship or a partnership opportunity, subcontracting opportunity to gain access to this. With the introduction of Canada's new mandate to award minimum of 5% of procurement spend to Indigenous businesses, this set aside is going to become a little bit more prevalent and should be looked at openly by a lot of businesses to look to collaborate and build partnerships with Indigenous businesses. With SAP Ariba, and even in the past with Canada with buyandsell.gc.ca, all of our procurements have an instrument inside of it, a link that allow any business to self-identify itself, to put their name forward for partnership opportunities. Maybe they can't fulfill the full component. They might want to work with others in a similar field to kind of come together as a group, and then one will become a prime and then submit that proposal. So take a look for those, because that can help you in creating those partnership opportunities for a marketplace that was previously not accessible. So keep that in mind. And then you could also search and find Indigenous businesses openly within the Indigenous business directory. Is just clicking the link and going in and searching and seeing by commodity area or, you know, industry as to whether or not you may want to communicate or link up with businesses for opportunities that you see this set aside being implemented on. The one thing you need to know about building relationships or networks within the government of Canada is that it's not like private sector. So here you have to understand that a lot of government officials cannot have a direct one-on-one relationship with any business. Certainly, there are individuals that are outward-facing that can be approached to a certain degree for you to inform them about, you know, your competitive advantage, what you can provide, whether you're qualified in a particular method of supply that Canada has, or you're looking for opportunities to price. All of those things are possible, but we recommend you come ready with a proper marketing strategy, something like a one-pager, but also understanding your pain points, our pain points, so that you can then maximize on that promotion. So if you're qualified in 2 or 3 standing offers or supply arrangements that we have, maybe perhaps you can identify those and say, hey, you know, by the way, if you're looking in this area, I'm qualified here, here, here. Or if you're doing low dollar opportunities, I'm available for these types of commodities. Or, you know, here's my brochure, here's my pricing. That will leave an impression, and that could be the extent of the relationship. They may reply back to you, say, thank you, or, you know, maybe we have a meeting, I want to hear more about what your services are, but maybe they don't. Maybe you've provided enough. But do your due diligence and then let the process take shape. Certainly, there's a lot of tools out there, but the most common tool for you to use is the Government of Canada's white pages called GEDS, the Government Electronic Directory Service. Which is, you know, a registry of employees, government employees that are outward facing. So the other thing you need to do and develop in your marketing strategy is who to contact. So you have, you know, you can't just look to find a ADM or a minister or deputy minister and send them details about what you do. Obviously, that may hit home, but they may probably, most likely, will percolate that down to the right business line or those frontline people that may be looking for those requests. So you can find those frontline people. Previously, I mentioned that you could search and find departments that have been historically buying information, and there's contract history that I'm going to talk about. But you can identify what your marketplace is, and if it's just 2 or 3 departments buying, maybe you want to find like a regional manager in a business line or a unit that's purchasing what you're doing, and focus your attention strategically on marketing to them. Now, the GEDS white pages doesn't really have outward-facing Department of National Defense, RCMP, or CSIS individuals, but they will have their general contact information. And for D&D, the base commander, or maybe even the general number for the base, would be available to access, and you can start if you want to promote to D&D like that. So just some things to think about. And there's also PSPC regional offices who understand their client needs, but are not the ones that are actually doing the procurements, but they can direct you as well. And that's our people within procurement within PSPC. Now, I don't have a lot of time, but I'm giving you this all in bulk and in high level. You know, please post your questions if you want some clarification, but I'll just continue to let you know that you really also need to know who your clients are, who the end users are, but also know your strengths, you know, where you stand and how competitive you are. Ultimately, what it may boil down to is how competitively you price and whether you can price better than others. So these are some of the things that you need to consider. And just like, you know, in most instances, even in private sector, they'll go out for multiple bids to get, you know, suppliers to provide pricing. So in the Government of Canada, we do it at a minimum of 3 suppliers for low dollar simple procurements, but it could be hundreds of people and businesses that are applying to win these contracts. And in a lot of instances, when we technically and you know, financially review your proposals, it's the most well-written, most well-scored combination and pricing that will determine that award at the end of the day. So it all depends on how you write your proposal. and that's how we keep it competitive. And most of the time, it could be as close as 1 or 2 or 3 points. That's the difference. So it is highly competitive, and I want you to be aware of that. And if you can't compete as a prime, you need to determine that. If you think you could do subcontractor work only, how does that work? You need to look and align yourself with the right primes. When we do major procurements, the Government of Canada usually hosts industry days where a lot of these large primes congregate to, but also look to partner and bring on subcontractors. And in some instances, we may have terms and conditions within that larger procurement that indicates, hey, you know what, if you bring on Canadian-based subcontractors, that you can get bonus points for that, and that's the industrial technological benefit policy, or other terms can be in there. You might want to look to subcontractor to these primes. So there's a lot of opportunities in that as well. Now, where do you find these opportunities? Well, for the longest time, since 2010, the Government of Canada has moved to an open source web platform to host our government electronic tenders. It used to be buyandsell.gc.ca /tenders. And within the last couple of years, for obvious obligation requirements and for modernizing procurement, we have transitioned to a new electronic procurement solution, which is SAP Ariba based, and it's called CanadaBuys.canada.ca. Now, the benefits of the registration: it's free. Searching is plain language. You land on Canada Buys. It's the authoritative source. Right away, you'll see the listing. It's already filtered by awarded contracts and currently active contracts. You can filter those out. You can do keyword searches and narrow it down. If you have your UNSPSC codes identified, you can just go directly to UNSPC type searches, bookmark those, or send notifications to yourself to keep you apprised of any new offerings that might be coming down the pipe. The other good important thing that's migrated from Buy and Sell over to Canada Buys as well is our open government portal. So the open government portal is actually on canada.ca. The main Government of Canada portal, and it's a listing of all of the spend by all of the government departments of contracts that they've awarded on an annual basis to companies here and abroad, that indicates to businesses potentially how large a marketplace you're involved in. So seeing how much that department may have been buying in your commodity, who the current suppliers are, maybe which methods of supply are currently open for refresh to allow you to jump into it, or how many are potentially coming down the road to be open so that you can bid on them and try to qualify as well. So there's a lot of information that can be garnered from this open government portal, and I encourage you to go search for it as well. Yeah, just you need to kind of figure things out, and that's the strategic business side of things. We can guide you to the front door through our office, but then you have to make those business decisions to take the steps that are required to move you forward. So researching can help you identify the departments, as I mentioned, that are spending, and other things associated with that, who the client groups are, and then who you could potentially promote yourself, which I mentioned to you a few minutes ago. Now, to reference it all together, regardless of the direction that we take, we always strive to achieve access, competition, and fairness in everything that we do. So as the majority of the contracts are below 25,000 or goods for 40,000, the government can and still tries to do competitive contracting. But under those thresholds, we could go non-competitive, like sole source, if it makes sense, right? If I have a need for something, a widget to buy, or maybe 10 of these widgets for my office, I'm not going to waste a person's time to run a procurement, seek out pricing, evaluate that, and award a contract that might take a week and a half, 2 weeks of time, cost maybe $5,000 to $10,000 plus the cost of the good. Whereas I can go somewhere and buy 10 of these widgets on a purchasing card, which the Government of Canada has, for $200. So it doesn't make sense. Where it makes sense, we can do non-competitive, and we still try to do competitive processing, even for low dollar opportunities. But for some of these levels and below, we do non-competitive as well. But we strive to achieve competition. Essentially, what we're trying to do is achieve best value for Canadians. It's taxpayers' dollars that we're handling. We have to be fiscally jurisprudent in the way we spend taxpayers' dollars, so it has to make sense, and it has to be competed for in most instances. So most of the time, these are the common methods of supply Canada uses to procure goods in excess of these thresholds, and including thresholds that are above the trade agreements that some of you may be subject to. The most common where we don't buy a lot of something often enough, we use requests for proposals, where we would put in certain terms and conditions in a proposal, post it on Canada Buys, you review it, you assess it, all of the terms and conditions are in that document as a guide. All that are looking to respond to it have an equal review opportunity, and from there, you all respond back to achieve the best score and be the best competitive price to be awarded that contract. So it comes down to best value. So a combination of your technical may be scored and pricing, but first you have to technically score to meet the conditions in order to then go to the pricing stage. So there's a variety of different opportunities or ways that we can set the selection method. If you want to find out more about that, our third seminar or our second seminar of the month, every Wednesday we do these seminars online, a webinar. The first one's the fundamentals. The second one's on bidding on opportunities, how to read a solicitation, what sections are important, how to visually see how a selection method is going to be implemented so that you can then determine how we do these things. If we're buying a lot of something often enough and it's based on fixed price, I have these widgets. I want to sell it for $10 a widget. Fixed pricing can be determined. We use a method of supply called a standing offer. And then if a fixed price cannot be determined and the pricing is fluctuating or volatile, we use supply arrangements. And I'll go into each one of these very quickly. So where we have a need for goods or services, we may put the standing offer into place, ask for proposals back through a tender that's posted on Canada Buys. You would respond and say, I can meet all of your conditions based on what you're asking me, and here's my pricing for all of the things that I'm submitting. If you qualify, then you get into the system as a qualified supplier under that standing offer. So it's not a contract award. Canada is indicating that we are qualifying you for when and if we need you. And depending on how you qualify within that method of supply, let's say it was a ranked standing offer, we would go to the best qualified, lowest price supplier first on the list, and then all others would be ranked underneath them. So if I had an order or a call up against a standing offer for $200,000 order for these widgets, I would go to the first on the list. And if I use that example I did previously of the $10, I would go to that individual company first because they're number one on my list. Can you fill this $200,000 order by the end of December? They may turn around and say, hey, we're busy. I can't do it. So I will go to the next on the list until I find somebody that can fill that order. And then they would then provide the goods. We would pay for that online, obviously, by direct deposit, net 30 days, and now much sooner than that through electronic procurement. So I hope that's clear. That's the standing offer. And then on supplier arrangements, we then pre-qualify you on technical merit, no pricing here, just technically qualify. So when we need these goods, services that we are requiring, we would then invite a group of suppliers from a particular category, depending on value of the contract that we're looking at. So if it's up to $3.75 million, in some instances, we would invite up to 15 businesses in a supply arrangement to do a pricing at that time. And then pricing would be the determining factor. If it's above 3.75 million, if there's 100 in the category, all 100 would be awarded that particular opportunity to price. And then we move forward. So these are more common now as we're buying a lot of things. So supply arrangements are good for things like services, like professional services, like IMIT, web designers, web architects, HR consultants and the like are using supply arrangements where if it's goods and widgets and prices are fixed on something, we would use a standing offer type of method of supply. But RFPs are the most common ones that we use. Here are some of the commonly established methods of supply. Pro services are for professional services. There's 164 categories of professional services, both IT and non-IT. for low dollar opportunities less than 100,000, which is the trade agreement threshold with the Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement. So anything above that needs to be posted openly and would be part of the task-based informatics or task and solutions professional services. Anything below the 100,000, businesses can register, Canadian businesses can register for pro services. And then they would have access to the under 100,000 category range. These all are discussed on the third Wednesday's seminar on professional services. I'm just going to tie it all together now and finish off to allow some time for questions. We do have a new initiative that was introduced probably in 2012, 2013 called the Collaborative Procurement Initiative. You can see the link below is canada.ca buying together. The Government of Canada has moved forward in working with our provinces, territories, and international jurisdictions to allow groups to utilize the established methods of supply, standing offers, supply arrangements soon to be added, that the Government of Canada has created to allow for synergies for these other levels of government so that they don't have to reproduce these in their jurisdictions and make it complicated for businesses as well to look to qualify in multiple qualification method of supply at different levels of government. So all they need to do now is go in and qualify in the federal government's level. The terms and conditions are at the highest level anyways. So they can then access suppliers from that list. So we're working collaboratively with the provinces, territories, municipalities, school boards, hospitals here in Canada, and in some instances with international bodies as well. So there's a group in Ottawa under PSPC that manages this. And if we have further events with your organization, they would likely be integrated into this and will provide some advice on their program as well. If you want more on this, we could definitely set up communication or respond back to you on it as well. Ronnie, you have a question or comment?
No, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So non-competitive approach, as I said, for under 25,000 for goods or 40,000 for services. If it's a pressing emergency, ice storms, natural disasters, am I going to spend time 4 weeks to do a process? People's lives are at stakes. I'm going to say company A, B, C here, Canada's going to spend the money. Please go save these people's lives. Pressing emergency, we can do sole source. No ifs, ands, or buts. Low dollar value contract under 100,000 for architectural engineering services. This is probably for project overruns. I'm not going to hire a new company to finish a project that somebody needs 60,000 to finish off next year. So I'm going to issue a sole source, finish it off, get it done. Not in the public's interest. Obviously, national security applies here in many of these. So I have a heightened threat of terrorist attack at our airports, but I have a deterrent, a new product or solution that I can implement that will help me resolve that fairly thoroughly. Am I going to run a process to let everyone know that this is the company and this is the product we've implemented? Not likely. I'm going to go with the national security, not in the public's interest, and award a non-competitive contract for that. And then there's only one supplier. Copyright would apply, where you're the leading authority. I need you to do an analysis or report. Who am I going to go with? You have the copyright, you have the knowledge, I would go with you. But if there's some doubt, we still try to achieve competition by posting what is known as an advanced contract award notice on the Government Electronic Tendering Service, which is Canada Buys now, to allow anyone, we say, hey, we're coming into a sole source with company A. These are the terms and conditions that are met. If you so deem that you have the same capabilities, please write to us within 15 days to allow us to review. And if you do meet some of all of the conditions, then we'll do a modified proposal and not award on direct source. So keep that in mind as well. The one thing that you should all look to help, with providing input to shape federal procurement are requests for information. RFIs are pivotal for businesses to get input into the federal procurement process. So a couple of years before we go into a procurement, we may post our RFI to solicit feedback from industry. This is your opportunity to come back to us and say, hey, you know what? I'd like to make this aware to you. You obviously are not doing it this way. I think you may want to consider this, or the industry currently is at this level, and you guys are maybe behind a schedule, or you're using old technology or something like that. This is what our procurement teams need to hear so that they can work with the client authorities, the departments that are asking for the stuff to happen, and be certain that we're accounting for everything that's current and appropriate to put in the terms and conditions. So RFIs are important. They're also known as letters of interest or LOIs. We have talked about transitioning to procurement through electronic procurement, Canada Buys, and all of that. I don't have time here, but just put it in canadabuys.canada.ca. It's very user-friendly. We can walk you through it as well if you'd like. Follow up with us. More than happy to do one-on-one sessions, as I'm going to get into. So these are the seminars available by Procurement Assistance Canada across all of Canada. We have 6 regional offices. I'll go into that in a second, but doing business is the fundamentals, finding opportunities for the Government of Canada, and electronic tendering services being introduced. Bidding on opportunities is the one we offer second week of the month on reading a solicitation, supplying professional services. And the last one is on security clearances. A lot of Canada contracts, if you're doing work in our buildings or using our equipment or material, would require some form of security clearance, and it takes time to get this. So if it's in a document, you'll need to execute the process that you need to do to get cleared. Otherwise, you can't be awarded that contract. So these are the seminars we offer throughout the month. We encourage you to take the first Wednesday. It's actually happening right now. If you miss it now, you could take it in January. If you're versed in some of the aspects of government procurement, you can then go into some of the others, but you want to get the context first. But you could always follow up with us through the one-on-one meetings that we have. They're online in our calendar. Vincent, if you want to post the calendar on the chat for people to go and follow, or our email contact to book appointments for one-on-ones, that would be appreciated as well. So these are the regional offices, both in Pacific, it's the EUCCAN and British Columbia. Western are all the Western provinces. Ontario here, we cover a very large space, just with some communities outside of Ottawa falling in National Capital Region. Quebec is 5, and all of the Atlantic provinces are out of Halifax. But we cover the region equally, and we are consistent in the information we provide. Wherever you're located, there's a PAC office to help you. Next steps, I'm going to provide this to you. Click on some of these links. Get registered as a supplier on Buy and Sell, SRI, but get registered on Canada Buys as well. Consult the service guide that we have to help you, guide you on how to register, find seminars, get a request or a call back, and follow us on canada.ca/PAC. I've said a lot, and it's a lot of information, unfortunately, to condense in 30-40 minutes, but that's my presentation, and I just wanted to give you that high-level overview, as it is a process. Everybody needs to be understanding of how to get involved and taking the right steps so that you don't get confused and discouraged and not take part. But it is a very large marketplace. Thomas and Marie, if we have any questions, be more than happy to take some.
Yeah, thank you very much, Manny, for this presentation. I think you provided many information. It was really concrete and helpful and useful. So thank you so much. We've got indeed some questions. I will start with 2. The first one is it's about tools and platforms. And so maybe you could say a few of these, you mentioned it, but to give some additional details, the question is, are there any tools or platforms that aggregate Canadian procurements, both federal and provincial? And the second one is about a more specific one about competition and no competition. The question is, if you have a product with no competition, how is that going to work out? Many of one of your colleagues.
Yeah, I'll jump in, and then Ronnie could help out probably. So on the first question, currently, as I mentioned, the Canadian Collaborative Procurement Initiative, this is a new initiative with the impacts of COVID, it's kind of slowed down, but we're still moving forward with collaboration with the various levels. So the tools that are available are currently standing offers in about 50 to 60 different types of commodities that we have. Things like snowmobiles, lab equipment are there that are used both by feds, province, territories, and even municipal and school level boards that have signed up through the Collaborative Procurement Initiative, and they have access to them. You can look on the Buying Together website, and there's probably more information in there, but that's how we integrate and collaborate with the different levels of government on some of these procurements. And then when they come up for refresh at times, there might be thought or input provided by the different levels to help improve how or what we go out for qualification. So I think on that one, the Collaborative Procurement Initiative is the one that I know that works together with multi-levels of government to utilize our tools or methods of supply. Ronnie, anything else on that?
No, I think you got everything, Manny, there.
Okay.
For any RFPs or some of the different tiers of government also post on Canada Buys as well. So you can find opportunities there. All federal opportunities are there too. Mm-hmm. So that's the way to go. But then for the CCPI, it's they're trialing out now the pro services, which is like Manny was saying, it's a supply arrangement that different tiers of government have access to as well.
Perfect. And on the second question, the non-competitive approach is, well, you should treat it as follows. So under the 25,000 or 40,000 for goods and 40,000 for services, if you promote yourself appropriately, get in that SRI registration system, you might be found, you might be included in submission of pricing between you and two others. So if you promote yourself, you better your chances of opportunities to be called to get pricing in. And then if you are successful and are awarded that contract, you directly are awarded the value of that contract. You provide us the goods, services that were awarded, and then we pay you. From the perspective of the MasterCard purchases, I could decide and say, hey, you know what? It's $2,000 or $3,000. It's easier for me to purchase by MasterCard. I can go to company X. They did previous work for me. I was happy with them. It's quick and the quality is great. I can just go out there. Or I may decide, hey, you know what? I used company A before. I do know also because they promoted, I'm going to try company C. So there's varying ways of how direct and source contracting can happen, but again, it's still in Canada's best interest to look at competition, but it may not necessarily need to be if it doesn't make sense. I hope that answered that question, Ronnie.
That's perfect.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes. No, I think so. Ronnie, do you want to say something additional? Sorry.
No, I'm good. Thank you. I think Manny got that one. We're good. Thank you.
Okay, great. No, thank you very much, Manny. We've got all the questions, more specific, those ones, which are there any statements you can make on timing, length of procurement requests? If there are minimum length at a procurement will stay open before being filled? Right. And for standing procurements, how fast will an organization need to be able to provide a good or service?
Yeah, that's the magical questions, right? So it's not, so this is where businesses kind of get a little bit lost, because all of our procurements requirements are they're unique. Every time there's a different length to some, there's less complexity to others. There are different products that would require a longer period of time. Like, for example, defense construction could take up to 20 years to complete, right? Now, staying open or keeping contracts open are determined by the contracting authority and the client authority based on a variety of different aspects, including timelines of budgets, procurement timelines for putting it together, and then what is an effective length of time to allow suppliers to respond. In most instances, this is about 4 to 6 weeks for common procurement, where we post, allow for question period to happen, clarification, people to download it, and ample enough time for people to prepare their proposals for a somewhat regular type of an offering. And then we would take it, people will evaluate it. It could take weeks, a month to do it, depending on how complex it is, how many evaluators there are, and then an award would happen. So it depends. You're looking at options that could be 2 to 3 months, or it could be larger, like years, or it could even be like 4 to 5 weeks. But there's still a need to allow that contract or tender to be open long enough to allow people to respond to it. In some instances, there are quick turnarounds because of pressures or priorities, and it might stay open for 7 days or 5 days. But those are probably quick solution type of requests that we're putting on. So the overall answer is it varies. That's why we don't have templates for people to use, because our procurements are different. Ronnie, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that sometimes another consideration too for like award would be security requirements, because that can take time for organizations to clear security requirements. So that's another consideration. However, I wanted to also add that for different supplier agents that we have for services, sometimes in terms of like being open for different suppliers to become part of that pre-qualified list, we go through quality refreshers too. So that's also to consider.
Sorry, Ronnie, you broke up there, but I think you were indicating that it depends. It could be a little bit longer for people to get their proposals in. We missed the last part.
No, I was just addressing. I don't know. I hope you can hear me okay now.
That's better now.
Yeah, perfect. Now, just kind of referring back to supplier agents, because sometimes different supplier arrangements open up for refreshers every quarterly, every month. So that's also an opportunity to consider for service providers.
Yeah, so like I said as well, the supplier arrangements do refresh, and we do take new intake for supplier arrangements for some of the common supplier arrangements. They refresh on a quarterly basis. Every quarter, you can look to download the latest document and respond to it, and then 4 months later, 3 months later, they'll evaluate you, and within a half a year, you could be qualified. Those are the common ones, like task-based informatics professional or task and solutions professional services that we talked about, IT and non-IT, and some other ones. Marie?
Okay, great. No, very clear. Thank you very much, Manny. Thank you, Ronnie. Maybe one of the last questions, because we have now 4 minutes left before the end of the webinar. First one, maybe additional details about Canada Buys. You mentioned and presented Manny. When Canada Buys integrates all provincial and municipal tender websites, it will be a single point of access?
Yes, correct. It will be a single point. It's SAP Ariba based, right? Although I got to be careful what I say here, because I am not the authority on this one. So essentially, we want it to be. I know that the provinces got their own electronic procurement solution in, it used to be Bravo Solutions, but now it's another name. But anyways, ideally for government tenders, it's going to be EPS-based SAP Ariba, 1 point, and other jurisdictions are in there as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe, some last questions regarding the CETA, because as EUCCAN works and promote also the CETA, and we understood that we are not only focusing today on the CETA, because it could be another topic, but is a company, if a company is European, but already registered in Canada and doing business through a subsidiary, do the CETA thresholds still apply?
That's a good question. So if you are a business here in Canada, you have a Canada Revenue Agency number and operating in Canada, you have the flexibility of taking part in federal procurement as a Canadian-based business. So the trade agreement thresholds would not apply. You could do business under the thresholds as well. But if you don't have that Canada Revenue Agency business number and established in Canada, you would be considered an international company, at which point you would need to consider the trade agreements. And if you're from the European Union, CETA would apply. Correct, Ron?
Yes, you got it, Manny. Yep.
Okay, great. And because of technology, it's magic, I just received an addition, and so it will be the last question by email. So it's regarding European companies. So I'm discovering at the same time and reading, do European companies that want to enter the procurement market in Canada have to be registered taxpayers here? which means they must have a branch office or representative office registered here before applying for an SRI number.
Good point. So on that, I think you need to consult with Canada Revenue Agency because the rules for businesses are through them. In order for you to register an SRI, we require you to have a CRA business number. However, if you don't have one, you could still apply as a consultant or sole proprietor. In a lot of instances, businesses that are like that are not registered with a CRA number, but they are located in Canada. So there are some nuances, but Canada Revenue should be the one that lets you know of that. But the SRI requires you to have a CRA number in order to get a PBN number, unless you're a sole proprietor, but still in Canada.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And the very last one we just received at the end right
Okay.
now. And
It's usually that way, right? One starts and then it doesn't end. That's okay.
Yeah. It means it's useful.
Good times.
Information you provide to file. Yeah, so the last one will be if an European company has its registered company in the USA, can it participate in Canadian government procurements without registration of the company in Canada?
No. So that one would then be even worse for the European company because they would be subject to the World Trade Organization thresholds as the US is. So those thresholds might be a little bit higher than the CETA ones. US companies, so we no longer have NAFTA. So NAFTA is not a procurement instrument or trade agreement that's impacting procurement. So currently it's the World Trade Organization, AGP, that governs that. And those thresholds would then need to be met for that US-based company to do business in Canada.
Okay, great. So
Yeah.
I think it's we're done that with all the questions. It's time for me to conclude. Or do you want the last word?
Yeah,
Marie?
I'm just going to say thank you very much to you, Marie, Thomas, and Adrian, the EUCCAN, and all of the participants here today. We encourage you to connect with our office. I see Vincent on video as well. Our team is here to help support you in your journey, whatever it may be in federal procurement. We have regional offices all across Canada. If you have concerns or thoughts, want to get more clarification on CETA and the terms and conditions, our colleagues at Global Affairs Canada are more than happy to help you out with that, or you can go online and find out information about that. As mentioned at the beginning, procurement utilizes those trade agreements as terms and conditions to direct how and businesses can compete. So that's how we apply the trade agreements. So looking forward to future collaborations on certain topics, maybe CETA being one of them. But again, thank you everybody from my team that was here today for this event.
Great. Now, thank you so much, and thank you, Manny, Ronnie, and Vincent for all the work you did for this webinar today. We're very happy to have the opportunity to organize it with you. It was a real pleasure and really, I think, very, very interesting. Thank you to all the attendees to the webinar today. As EUCCAN, so the EU Chamber of Commerce here in Canada, we are going to continue our work to deepen the trade and economic and business relation between the EU and Canada. For your information too, the presentation made today and the video will be shared also on our social media and websites. Do not hesitate to reach us for any questions, and I would like to have a special thanks to my colleague Thomas, who is connected, and we both work on the organization of the webinar today, so thank you very much. Thank you all of you, and looking forward to welcome you for a new and next event soon. Thank you.
Great.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Good job. Thank you all. Have a good day. Bye-bye.